The floor is now given to Ms. Marine Le Pen, President of the National Rally Group. Mr. Prime Minister, Madam President, dear colleagues, General de Gaulle once used a phrase to describe the reign of political parties. He called it a regime of misfortune. By saying that, the general thought he was describing the past, that of the Fourth Republic. He saw himself as a historian. But to the greatest misfortune of France and the French people, you have made him a prophet. Because this regime of misfortune is precisely the political situation we face today. The result of the pitiful coalition of establishment parties that have taken turns running the state for the past 50 years and now have only one goal, to cling to power for a few more weeks, at the expense of the people and the nation. This regime of misfortune, the very institutions of the Fifth Republic, were designed to make it impossible. But through endless electoral pacts and backroom agreements, you have managed to turn our fundamental law into a suffocating cage for democracy. This distortion of our institutions has now reached its climax. The French people no longer even count the motions of censure that have been tabled, debated, and voted on since Emmanuel Macron's re-election in 2022. They no longer even know who sits in the government, and who could blame them, since the lifespan of ministers is now measured, not in years, not even in months, but sometimes in hours. This pathetic spectacle is a poison for our democracy, because it exasperates our citizens and drives them away from public engagement. Yet, a democracy only lives through the energy and commitment of its citizens. I therefore hope that the theater of maneuvers performed by all the establishment parties for more than a year has not permanently engraved in the minds of millions of French people a deep disgust for political action. But let us come to the matter at hand. The National Assembly is meeting today to decide whether your government, Mr. Prime Minister, should be censured over your draft budget. I say your budget. Forgive me. Perhaps I should rather say Mr. Bayrou's budget or Bercy's budget, because this budget is so little yours that it doesn't even include the promise you made to the Socialist Party to suspend the pension reform imposed by Elizabeth Borne through Article 49.3. In fact, it's even worse. The trajectory of Borne's reform is included in your draft text. I will return to that. This budget, therefore, is a veritable museum of horrors. Filled with all the outdated ideas that have been gathering dust in the drawers of the Finance Ministry for years. This is not a blank year. It's a black year for the French people, especially for those who work and pay taxes. First, there's the continuation of the fiscal assault, 19 billion euros in additional taxes, including 10 billion from the income tax alone, through the freezing of the tax brackets, a measure that, just a year ago, you were decrying yourselves. You are about to bring 200,000 middle-class households into the income tax bracket, perhaps as a reward for working France, even though our employment rate is among the lowest in Europe. Then there's the continued explosion of public spending, 28 billion euros of additional expenditure beyond inflation. No effort to reduce the cost of administration. No effort to rationalize the jungle of agencies and various bodies that cost tens of billions every year. There is also a total lack of effort on immigration, no action whatsoever to reduce, even by a single euro, the billions that the state medical aid and the insane visa for healthcare system cost us every year. A system that keeps breaking records. Finally, and this is perhaps the worst, there are measures of social indecency. I'm referring to the taxation of student jobs, but especially to the taxation of benefits paid by Social Security in cases of long-term illness. We've already seen increased medical deductibles and the delisting of medicines and dressings, but now it's the most vulnerable, those far from employment, often living in isolation, that you intend to make pay for your cowardice and your failures. Mr. Prime Minister, I do not wish to add to the already mediocre and hollow tone of political debate, but seriously, how do you expect the French to accept yet another year, after decades of decline, in which their social rights are eroded further, while you refuse to touch the irrational benefits granted to the entire world at France's expense? How can you imagine that the most taxed and overburdened country in the world will not punish you, will not reject you, when each year brings more injustice and dispossession, always to the detriment of the weakest French citizens, never to the detriment of uncontrolled mass immigration that drains our social funds and makes our streets increasingly violent? All of this fuels division and resentment. All of this worsens the already catastrophic state of our public finances, after 8 years of Macronist whatever it takes, under the anxious gaze of financial markets that still lend to us, and of taxpayers, households, and businesses who will eventually foot the bill for this budgetary disaster. That is why, Mr. Prime Minister, we will unhesitatingly vote to censure your government. Quite simply because this is not a budget, that is to say, the sum of political choices. This budget is the ultimate act, we hope, of a political system that has run out of breath, out of ideas, and that has produced nothing but a nation drained of its strength, bled by taxes and brutalized socially. Just look around to be convinced. The public statistics speak for themselves. Business bankruptcies, especially small and medium enterprises, are breaking decades-long records. Poverty is rising. Access to healthcare and housing is collapsing. And immigration, as I've said, like our public debt, is completely out of control. Such is the France Emmanuel Macron leaves behind. Such is the country we will have to rebuild, because sooner or later it will fall to the national rally to undertake that mission, and we will carry it out successfully. But everything I've said, Mr. Prime Minister, is obvious. I doubt I've taught you anything new, and that in itself is perhaps the saddest truth of all. France's problems are well known, except perhaps to a handful of leftists locked in denial. The remedies are known as well. Only one thing is missing: the courage to implement them. But when the political class collectively chooses denial to protect its own petty interests, nothing is possible. That is precisely what we are living through today. Everything in recent days has revealed that your only objective is to avoid new elections, to bypass the people, to silence them, to make them invisible. By submitting this budget, you are effectively cutting off your own limb, abandoning the only real reform Emmanuel Macron ever undertook, the pension reform. A reform, by the way, for which you set the country ablaze, only to abandon it 18 months later in exchange for a worn-out armchair. In a few moments, the National Assembly will vote on 2 motions of censure. And if a majority of deputies want your departure, the unfathomable foolishness of others posturing may save you. If the far-left France Unbowed, LFI, refuses to vote for our motion, and if a few Republicans, LR, convinced by censure refuse to vote for theirs, they will, through their narrow-minded sectarianism, condemn the French people to suffer your budget of misfortune. After your electoral deal with Jean-Luc Mélenchon in the legislative runoffs, it is now Olivier Faure who may save you temporarily in office, a visionary leader who until yesterday didn't even know by what legal mechanism the suspension of Born's pension reform, the object of the Socialist Party's shameful agreement, would take place. This agreement, after multiple meetings between you, will surely delight Mr. Faure's allies. It is not only shameful, it is marked by deceit and dishonesty. Because nothing guarantees that this amendment suspending Born's reform will survive rejection by the Social Security Financing Bill, or rewriting by the Senate, or the Joint Committee, or censorship by the Constitutional Council as a budgetary rider, or simply its disappearance if the budget is passed by ordinance. You will then have the easy excuse of blaming its censure, as that has become a national sport in Macron's France. That is how you let your immigration law be gutted last year, much to the delight, we are told, of Emmanuel Macron himself. But there's more, even better than the usual petty betrayals of the socialists, who now endorse the social punishment of the weakest and the freezing for another year of civil servants' pay. Yes, better still, there is Mr. Wauquiez, there is LR. After campaigning for months against being absorbed by Macronism, Mr. Wauquiez has finally clarified his position. He prefers to dissolve himself into socialism instead, supporting both the suspension of Born's reform and the de-indexation of pensions. Thank you, Mr. Wauquiez, for this illuminating clarification. Your voters will appreciate it. Here then, Mr. Prime Minister, are those who may allow you to survive a few more weeks. All these parties united by one shared fear of elections. So afraid, in fact, that they have forgotten their constitutional duty to contribute to the expression of suffrage. Now, they are united instead in contributing to its suppression. And out of modesty, I will not even mention the statements of your own allies. Edouard Philippe, who calls for the resignation of the president but refuses dissolution, and Gabriel Attal, who says he no longer understands Emmanuel Macron, but still supports the government. It's all so absurd, all of it is pathetic, and all of it I hope will soon be nothing but a B.